for services, overcoming resistance to rate increases. Obviously, most customers don't want their rates to increase, so you have to provide a reason and really convince them of that reason. Diminishing resources, rising service expectations of customers, increasingly stringent regulatory requirements, which are constantly changing, responding to emergencies as a result of any asset failures. And then the last challenge is going to be protecting assets, right? However, some benefits of asset management are that you're prolonging your asset life and you're aiding in that rehabilitation, repairing, replacement decisions. You're meeting customer demands with a focus on system sustainability, setting rates based on sound operational and financial planning, budgeting focused on activities crucial to any sustained performance, meeting any service expectations and regulatory requirements, improving your responses to emergencies, and hopefully improving security and safety of your assets. So the first step in effectively managing our assets is understanding their current state. We acknowledge that sometimes gathering precise data can be challenging, but that shouldn't deter us, right? Over time, as we rehabilitate, repair, or replace our assets, our inventory becomes much more accurate. So to begin, we want to ask ourselves some questions. What assets do we own? Where are these assets located? What's their current condition? How much useful life do they have left? And what's their estimated value? So to achieve these goals, it's crucial to follow some best practices. So first, preparing an asset inventory in a comprehensive system map helps visualize where assets are located and what assets you have in store. Secondly, developing a condition assessment and rating system. This helps ensure that we can evaluate the state of your assets accurately. And then thirdly, assessing the remaining useful life by consulting projected useful life tables or decay curves, which is pretty vital in making informed decisions. And then lastly, determining asset values and replacement costs. Again, pretty essential for sound financial planning. Asset investment planning also plays a pivotal role. So it allows us to have a clear and holistic understanding of our assets, their current state, how critical they are, and how everything fits into our system. It's not just about the obvious assets, but also the less visible ones, including those underground. So to achieve the comprehensive understanding, we need to integrate data from various sources, such as work order records, maintenance records, billing records, construction records, and utilizing GIS, GPS mapping helps to pinpoint asset locations very accurately, and flow analysis gives us insights to asset performance, and risk-based condition assessment is pretty crucial as well. The second piece is level of service. So defining and meeting sustainable levels of service and asset management not only helps enhance systems performance, but also enables us to effectively communicate objectives. So one of the first steps in implementing a successful asset management program is understanding our required sustainable level of service. Defining what we mean by sustainable service levels, which can encompass various factors, including quality, quantity, reliability, and environmental standards. These help us set performance goals, both short and long-term performance goals. So to establish sustainable service levels, we should ask ourselves, what level of service do our stakeholders and customers demand? What are the regulatory requirements that we need to adhere to? How does our actual performance measure up? And what are the physical capabilities of our assets? So some best practices are analyzing both current and anticipated customer demand, and gauging their satisfaction with the system. Another thing is having a solid understanding of current and expected regulatory requirements that you have to meet. and you want to equip teams with the skills and knowledge required to achieve those requirements. Another thing, considering writing and communicating a level of service agreement to the public. It will describe systems performance targets and helps promote some public transparency. You can engage with the community and educate them about objectives and involve them in that decision-making practice. And then finally, another best practice would be using level of service standards to track systems performance over time and make data-driven improvements. So you can use key performance indicators or KPIs, and these indicators help to track performance and identify areas for improvement. Another thing you can do is create SMART goals, right? Specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. You want to make sure that your goals are very, very specific, right? Like, I want to do 4 of these. You want it to be measurable, which is, again, tied in with that 4. Achievable. So what time-bound area can you achieve this goal? And make sure that it's relevant. Is it relevant to your system? Is it really going to affect anything? Is that what your customers need? Is that what you need as a system? And by defining and meeting these sustainable levels of service, you can improve systems performance and enhance the communication with your stakeholders. The third piece is critical assets. So understanding which assets are vital for sustaining our performance and how to manage the consequences of their potential failures, right? Assets do fail. So how we manage the consequences of the failures are pretty crucial. Not every asset carries the same risk of failure. Neither is it equally critical to the system's operations. So it's very essential to pinpoint the assets that are required to sustain the system's performance and label those as the critical assets. Again, their critical assets are those that we identify as having a very high risk of failure, maybe due to age or poor condition, and major consequences if they do fail. The consequences can include, significant expenses, system failures, safety concerns, and other things. And we can decide how critical each asset is and rank them accordingly. Questions you can ask yourself is, how can and do our assets fail? What are the specific ways that our assets can fail? What's the likelihood of our assets failing? The consequences that they do fail, and what are the associated costs, not just the repair cost, but also social, environmental, and other related expenses. So some best practices to follow are listing your assets according to how critical they are. So creating a list of assets and making sure that you figure out what happens if that asset were to fail and how critical that failure would be. Conducting a failure analysis, which includes root cause analysis and failure mode analysis to understand why the assets are failing. Determining the probability of failure and categorizing assets by the type of failure that they're prone to. Assessing the risk of failure and the consequences in the event of a failure. You can utilize asset decay curves to understand how assets deteriorate over time. And if your system has a vulnerability assessment, you can review and update it to align with those findings. So the outcome of this process is a risk-based ranking of the most critical assets. It helps us prioritize our efforts and resources for maintenance, repair, and replacement where they're needed the most. So by determining those critical assets and understanding how to manage the consequences, again, you're going to enhance your system's reliability and resilience. The fourth step of the process is identifying our minimum life cycle costs and optimizing the way we manage those resources. This process helps us make more informed, cost-effective decisions while providing a higher level of service. In the realm of systems, a significant portion of our expenses, about 85%, goes to operations and maintenance, or O&M, personnel, and the capital budget. So it's here where the concept of asset management really shines. You want to look at the most cost-efficient options for delivering superior service. Optimization is key. So we want to make sure that we work with our O&M crews and make sure that they're doing not only what's necessary, but also make sure that they're executing it in the most effective manner. So to achieve optimization, we want to ask ourselves questions. What alternative strategies exist for managing O&M, personnel, and capital budget accounts? What strategies are most feasible and appropriate for our organization? And what are the costs involved in rehabilitating, repairing, or replacing our critical assets? So streamlining the approach, we can move from reactive to more predictive maintenance, right? So shifting this helps us to address issues before they become critical. And then understanding cost and benefits. It's pretty important to understand the cost and benefits of rehabilitation versus replacement, especially for the critical assets. Life cycle cost analysis helps us analyze the full life cycle cost, again, particularly with our critical assets. Deploying resources based on asset conditions, ensuring that we're allocating them where they're needed the most, and then understanding the root causes of asset failure. They all help us to develop specific response plans. The last piece of asset management that we'll talk about is defining the best long-term funding strategy. Making sound financial decisions and establishing an effective funding strategy are pretty pivotal for the success of our asset management program. Understanding financial landscape is pretty essential. It empowers us to make more informed decisions and sets the foundation for a sustainable asset management program. A significant part of the process is creating a financial forecast for our system. The forecast will help us evaluate the financial health of our water system and make informed decisions about long-term funding strategies. Do we have sufficient funding to maintain our assets at the level of service required? That's a great question to ask yourself. Is our rate structure sustainable, meeting the long-term needs of your system? And this really ties back to what Austin talked about yesterday, which is, again, changing your rate structures. We have a lot of resources on that. And so if you do need assistance, we would love to assist with that. We have a lot of tools as well. To address the questions asked in the previous slide, again, we can revise our rate structure, evaluate and potentially revising the rate structure helps us with long-term requirements of our system. If we're not charging enough or if it's unsustainable for the customer, then we really need to revise that rate structure. Creating a dedicated reserve, so building a reserve from current revenues, which is often referred to as creating an asset annuity, which ensures more financial sustainability. And then the third of our best practices is going to be exploring financing options. So assessing the potential of financing asset rehabilitation, repair, and replacement through borrowing or seeking other financial assistance. So now that we've learned about the 5 core pieces of asset management, we can talk about next steps. So the 5 core questions framework for asset management is the starting point for the asset management, but beyond planning, asset management should be implemented to achieve continual improvements through a series of plan, do, check, and act steps. So For the planning stage, your utility obviously should answer the 5 core questions framework in the short term and revise asset management plans in the long term. You want to plan on doing this, but again, don't forget about SMART goals. Make the plan achievable, relevant, and time bound. That'll tie us into the do, right? We want to actually implement the asset management program. So once you've answered the 5 core questions and created a long-term asset management plan, we want to actually implement the program. And I think this is one of the sticky pieces, but there's no point in creating a plan that doesn't get implemented, right? Checking. So we want to make sure that you're constantly evaluating your progress, any regulations that are changing, and you want to change those factors and create new best practices as they arise and update asset management plans. And then act as the final piece. So we want to take action based on our review results. Is the plan working? Is there anything else that needs to be done? And asset inventory and assessment funding is 100% grant money, and all of AIA projects must include some amount of inventory and condition assessment. The program was never intended to be a program to fund complete asset management plans for all systems, but to provide kind of a base level information that the recipient can use to inform their managerial, financial, and infrastructure needs. So typically, AIA projects will help with a complete inventory of all assets, risk-based condition assessments of pretty much most of your critical assets, O&M plan for most critical assets, and then a capital improvement plan. So again, there's more to asset management planning than just creating a simple list of assets and noting what their condition is. And there are a lot of resources out there, including an AIA grant, which can also help you fund development of other programmatic approaches to asset management planning efforts. And the last thing I wanted to share on asset management is the Southwest Environmental Finance Center Asset Management Switchboard. I know they have a lot of valuable information and resources that walk you through navigating asset management. You see the 5 core components there, and it takes you a little bit past the basics of what we talked today. So now we'll move on to workforce development. Basically, how can we build out and maintain our workforce, right? So let's talk about it. What is workforce planning? There's typically 4 parts to it: succession planning, retention, recruitment, and messaging. I would also add a 5th challenge, which is sometimes self-motivation, right? Not just retaining employees, but also how to keep people running the facilities and keep themselves excited about what they do. Succession planning is a very important component, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but making sure that you have a plan for when your people retire. It's incredibly important in maintaining your system. Retention is pretty crucial. It costs a lot of money to train employees, so we want to keep those employees around that we have for as long as possible. Recruitment, so how are we selling younger generations on working in the water and wastewater industry? And then lastly, messaging, right? So how are you sharing what you do with the public? Does the public know about the water and wastewater facility in their area? And after we go into a bit more depth on those 4 components, we'll touch on workforce challenges as well as some succession planning tips for public utilities. We're going to do another poll. So let me activate that. So basically, this question is asking, which of the 4 components of workforce development does your utility or organization struggle with the most? And I'll let you guys all answer that. I didn't give an option for none of the above, so everyone has to give some response. Looks like most people have voted, but I'll still give about a minute fully. Okay, I'm going to close and share the poll. So it looks like most people struggle with recruitment. And then the second is succession planning. So we'll definitely go into a lot of detail about succession planning and recruitment. And I know not very many people included messaging, but messaging really does tie in to both of those things, especially recruitment. All right. So first, we're going to talk about succession planning. The official definition is a systematic approach to building replacement workers to ensure continuity by identifying potential successors and critical work processes. Simply put, succession planning is looking at all of your key people and asking, what do we do when they leave? So historically, especially at small plants, there would be a more or less informal agreement. Folks put in their time, wait about 20 years, supervisor retires, and they get the job. But as more people enter the water workforce, different backgrounds, cultures, it's definitely not quite as easy. And these days, there's no guarantee the knowledge of the previous supervisor is going to be transferred on its own, and we definitely need a map. So why is this, you may ask? It helps us avoid conflict, make sure if there is competition, it is healthy competition and not disastrous competition. It aligns incentives of your facility or department with the individual incentives of each member of the team. There's greater transparency. Open discussions are definitely the way to go. So to make a map of sorts, we want to identify important positions and think about knowledge, skills, and abilities that this person has. Can these things be replaced? Can these things be taught? Do we have someone currently on our team who could replace these people? Once you think about these things, then you want to think about how to get someone from the ground built all the way up to the point of being, let's say, a supervisor, right? What does that entail? How long is that going to take? Are they on track? There's so many other questions that you can ask, but we'll just stop there. Again, succession planning is really about thinking through what happens when people leave. They might retire. They might get poached by a neighboring utility offering better benefits or career growth. They might transition out of the water sector completely. Transitions can happen pretty suddenly. It happens even more so these days. Families are definitely a lot more flexible geographically, and I think the pandemic has had a huge impact on the working world. You know, a few years ago, we wouldn't have had as many opportunities to have hybrid positions or fully remote positions, and that's really something to think about. Another way to think of this is disaster planning. So thinking of all your scenarios and build in redundancy into your human systems, just like you would do with your water or wastewater operation systems, right? And we'll circle back to succession planning after we get through the 4 components of workforce development and talk a little bit more on how you can plan for succession. So then as the slide suggests, it's often easier to keep your current team members than to go through the lengthy and costly process of recruiting and training new ones. In today's diverse workplace, we're often working alongside individuals from various age groups. Each of them have their unique perspectives and values. So to enhance retention, I'm going to talk about first minding generational gaps, and then we'll talk about some other just basic retention tactics. So engaging An open dialogue encourages more communication with your team, allows different generations to share their viewpoints and learn from one another. More flexible work arrangements, right? So we just talked about how the pandemic has affected our work landscape. So you can consider more flexible work arrangements that accommodate for more needs and preferences of your team members, from Gen Z to baby boomers. A lot of people have kids, so you want to think about that as well, right? Mentoring and reverse mentoring. This is kind of one of those things that's really important these days, is implementing mentoring programs. So you can pair experienced team members with newer ones, so they can learn those roles. And then reverse mentoring is where younger team members mentor senior colleagues on technology and trends. And that can also be a pretty valuable tool. Recognition and rewards. So tailoring your recognition and rewards programs to either acknowledge achievements in ways that resonate with each generation, whether it's public recognition for a millennial or private appreciation for Gen X. Professional development, offer continuous learning opportunities to foster growth and skill development. It helps team members at all stages of their careers. You can partner with local organizations or have like some sort of networking availabilities. Also, just webinars and trainings and things like that are really helpful for professional development. And then the last thing I have here is an inclusive culture, right? So we want to foster a culture where everyone feels valued regardless of their age, and just want to create a culture of respect. So you can just mind the generational gap and implement some of these strategies. You'll create a little bit more of a productive work environment and make it a lot easier to retain current team members. So now we're going to touch on some methods that a lot of people know about, but I just wanted to mention, right? These are kind of typical retention methods. So offering competitive compensation and benefits, opportunities for advancement. A lot of people go into their job and really want to climb the ladder. A positive work environment, work-life balance, recognition and rewards, regular feedback and development. You could implement employee wellness programs. Transparent communication is really important. Everyone feels valued when they're all being a part of the conversation. Exit interviews are really great to get a gauge on maybe things that you could improve, and lets the employee kind of get out why they're leaving. And I think that that's really valuable information. Team building and social events. I know our team just recently did an escape room and it was really great. It's hard to be able to interact with your coworkers on a more personal level unless you're put in these social events and team building events. And it definitely helps with your positive work environment, right? Recognition of personal achievements. I think that this is so great. You can recognize when someone's had their year anniversary. That's a lot of work, right? 2-year anniversary, 10-year anniversary, 25-year anniversary. It always feels great to be recognized and to have your achievements kind of actually resonate with other people on your team. And then the last thing is leadership development. I know a lot of times people will only focus on developing younger people, but the leadership team also needs development as well, right? You can't constantly be being better and better if your management is not. Now we're going to move on to recruitment. So we can consider new approaches to attract talent. So I'm going to explore some various avenues. And I know that a lot of people on here said that they have a hard time with recruitment. And I know that it is hard with the water and wastewater industry. So the first thing I want to mention is community colleges and technical schools. So educational institutions like this can help and serve as kind of a gold mine for potential candidates, collaborating with them to create specialized water industry programs and promote careers in water and wastewater related fields. It's always really nice to collaborate with community colleges. Economic development organizations and workforce development boards are pretty key players in economic growth, right? You can partner with them to emphasize the role of the water and wastewater industry and local job creation and economic stability. Unions and labor groups can be pretty valuable allies in recruitment efforts. They help to showcase the benefits of unionized work, job security, and career advancement in specifically the water and wastewater industry. Community-based groups and nonprofits help. You can collaborate with them to promote water industry careers to underserved communities. You can highlight the industry's role in local sustainability and environmental stewardship. That's a huge plus. And then embracing an increasingly mobile workforce. I know that it's hard with certain jobs, but recognizing the shift towards a more mobile workforce, offering remote work options, flexible schedules, opportunities for cross-regional collaboration, which attracts professionals that are looking for that flexibility. Again, we want to focus on what makes the industry an exceptional choice. Professional development and training. The water sector offers ample opportunities for professional development and training. As the industry evolves, continuous learning and skill development are pretty crucial. So if you focus on professional development and training, it will keep you more at the forefront of the latest technologies and practices, and make people more interested in the position. Job security, the water and wastewater sector, it's not just a job, it's a long-term career. It provides a sense of job security that's pretty appealing, especially in today's dynamic employment landscape. Water and wastewater professionals are always in demand, so that does typically ensure some stability in the careers. Quality of life. Working in the water sector often means living in beautiful, vibrant communities. The quality of life offered with clean and safe water supplies reflects the sector's commitment to making communities healthier and much more enjoyable places to live. And then, dedicated to a larger purpose, right? So emphasizing what sets the sector apart is the commitment to a larger purpose, right? Providing communities with access to clean, safe water. Working in the field means you're a part of something a lot bigger, and you're contributing to the well-being of society. Some tips for smaller communities. People who live in, you can tell them this, right? People who live in the city have a much higher risk of anxiety and mood disorders. The New York Times Magazine states that children who are brought up in a city are twice as likely to develop schizophrenia later in life. I mean, what better selling point is there to living in a small town? There's a lot more safety in small towns. Outdoor exercises can boost mental health. And again, it's cheaper to live in a small town than a large city. This is definitely a point to make if you're offering salary and you want to kind of offset that salary difference. And then if you look to the right side of the slide, you'll see some Kentucky-specific organizations that are also strong and active professional organizations that provide support, mentoring, training, and networking opportunities. So new and long-time employees don't feel so alone in their work. One of our partners is American Water Works, and I'm not sure if we've worked specifically with the Kentucky section, but I know that they would be a great resource for offering networking opportunities and, again, multiple resources. So the fourth, which I mentioned earlier, which really does connect to all of the other three, and I think can be really challenging for smaller water and wastewater systems, is really nailing down your messaging. Instead of seeing messaging as a burden or another task like adding an insert into a bill or finding an intern to post stuff on social media, Think of it more as an invitation to your community to support your work. Messaging is about communicating value across cultures and across generations. And it's also about demonstrating thought leadership in your community. But again, mostly it's about inviting residents and businesses to share in your success. It can literally mean inviting them. You see here, I have Pure Tap in Louisville. So for the second year in a row, Pumpkins at Kentucky Kingdom transformed their amusement park into a fall wonderland. Louisville Water went behind the scenes to learn how much hard work Louisville Pure and how much Pure Tap it takes to create these seasonal displays scattered throughout the park. And I think it's really cool that they have merch everywhere. It definitely increases awareness for that utility. Other examples of fun messaging are from Sanitary District 1. Sanitary District 1 serves North Kentucky, and they offer visits from their mascot named Splash McLean. Splash McLean will go to schools, events, and pretty much anywhere you ask him to come. And then another example is again back with Louisville Water. They are a much bigger utility than most in Kentucky, but they offer tours and field trips of the facility, which could be something that you implement. And they have a waterworks museum, which is something that's really interesting and pretty out of the box. So the goal here, is inviting people. And if they show up to these invitations, then clearly it's working fine. If they don't show up, then I think, the messaging needs to be changed. It just suggests that they don't feel invited or very excited about joining in the industry. Again, we know that messaging is typically one of those things that systems don't like to do. But again, it's really great at increasing public support and does tie into recruitment a lot. So infrastructure upgrades. So if you start by emphasizing the importance of infrastructure upgrades to the public, you can explain how modernizing essential systems can, lead to improved services, better quality of life, and a stronger economy for your community. You can make the connection between infrastructure and public health crystal clear, right? Showcase how a well-maintained and updated infrastructure directly benefits the health and well-being of the public. Address the compensation aspect, right? Highlight how investing in the workforce not only attracts talent, but also retains experienced professionals who can make a much more significant impact. And then illustrating how infrastructure investments lead to growth. It's a win-win situation for both the community and the economy, right? More jobs, more businesses, and more opportunities. Leveraging local nonprofits. Again, we kind of touched on this, but you can partner with them and share your mission, and they can help amplify your message, engage the community, and provide some valuable support. Co-creation of content. So collaborating with the community in the content creation process, involving citizens, businesses, and experts to co-create content that resonates with your audience. And this ties into telling your story. You want to tell the stories of those impacted by your initiatives, right? You want to share personal narratives that demonstrate the positive effects of your efforts on real people's lives. And you can do this in so many creative ways. You can film, you can write, you can draw. I know that we just recently hired a strategic outreach coordinator, and he is really big on storytelling. We're interviewing community members and interviewing them specifically on our projects and how it's impacted them. And I think that a video of people sharing what we've done in an impactful way is really great messaging. So now we're going to move on to the water workforce challenges and then some succession planning tips. So there's obviously several challenges with the water and sewer workforce. one big challenge is the first point here, which is the aging workforce. Most people in the water and wastewater industry are planning on retiring in the near future, and we have to plan accordingly, right? This goes back to asset management. Who are key personnel, and how much time and money is it going to cost to replace them? Do you have anyone in training now? Do you have someone in mind for these roles? The second challenge that we have here is a lack of public recognition. People are not necessarily aware of jobs in the water or wastewater sector. So it's up to us and other people in the industry to explain why working with your utility or in the industry is a good career choice. Some methods for explaining this are talking about how everyone needs access to safe drinking water. It's a public service. And there's an aspect of environmental stewardship. Other things to think about when assessing your own utility are things like upward mobility. People are really attracted to jobs that they can move up in. So with that in mind, is your workforce planning for career advances? Are you a big enough company to offer certain benefits? If there isn't upward mobility, is there a system for people to move on to in other systems? And then the last piece to consider as you plan on building out your workforce is diversity. 85% of the people who work in the water industry are male, and 2/3 are white. So, you have to assess, does your system care about this? And if so, are you recruiting from the right places? And are you creating that kind of accommodating atmosphere? If you consider more diverse candidates, there's a lot more doors, definitely a lot more people that you can attract to your organization. We're going to do another poll so we can talk more about succession planning. So let me, all right. I'll give you a minute on this as well. So basically, we're just trying to assess, has your utility begun to think about succession planning, and where are you in that process? I'll give you guys about 10 more seconds. If anyone hasn't voted, go ahead and put your votes in. All right, great. So if you guys look, it looks like most people have thought of a plan, but definitely haven't implemented it. And then the second is people just haven't begun to think of a plan. And I know that it's one of those things where, right, succession planning is a little awkward to prepare for because you don't want the person who you're preparing on leaving to feel any kind of way about it. But it's not like that. So I'm going to share some things. So this is kind of the wrap up on workforce development. So these are some great succession planning tips for more seamless transitions. And we want to make sure that we're providing our essential services and not losing that continuity. So first thing is knowledge transfer. We're going to talk about the position knowledge survey a little bit later, but you want to identify the wealth of institutional knowledge within your organization and really work on effectively transferring it to the next generation of employees. You can do this through the position knowledge survey, but it's essentially a way to document specific skills, expertise, and tacit knowledge required to perform various job functions. Gap analysis, right, helps us identify potential knowledge and skill shortages, and it helps you plan for the future to help plan for where your organization may fall short in terms of future leadership and critical job roles. We want to focus on critical tasks when doing any sort of succession planning. Um, Prioritizing succession planning efforts where they'll have the most significant impact on service delivery and organizational stability is pretty self-explanatory, but we want to mainly focus on our critical people. Um, Community demographics. So you want to start considering demographics of your community. Is it changing? Are there going to be new challenges and expectations? You want to align succession planning with the evolving needs of your community. I have two things here. So EJ Screen is pretty helpful. There's definitely some pitfalls in it, but overall pretty helpful in assessing risks in your community. And EJ Screen is through EPA. And then another helpful tool is Social Explorer. Social Explorer allows you to see maps and summaries of communities, and you can really dig into specific demographic information that you need. There's also so many maps out there that are useful for this as well. And I think maps are one of the more important pieces of data that we can look at. The last piece here is regulatory changes. So we want to stay attuned to regulatory changes within the industry and anticipate how these changes might impact the workforce and adjust those succession plans accordingly. So before we move into how we're transferring the knowledge, I just want to touch on the types of knowledge. And there's going to be two types I'll talk about today, which is explicit and tacit. So explicit knowledge can be readily transferred to others. It can be easily articulated, standardized, and shared independently of its human source, or it can be stored in systems or processes. So the most common types of explicit knowledge are manuals, documents, and procedures, right? They're physical pieces of knowledge. Tacit knowledge is what we know, but it is not or cannot always be articulated. Often people aren't even aware that they have this knowledge or that it could be important to others. The position knowledge survey is really helpful in finding out what this tacit knowledge is, right? It's not easily shared, requires more extensive personal contact, or hands-on experience. So examples of this. An employee might know the best way to complete a task, but it differs from the way that it's described in a manual. The employee's way was learned over time through trial and error. This is this kind of knowledge only because it's not been articulated or standardized. You can actually physically update the manual with this kind of knowledge, but another type of unarticulated knowledge is when an employee knows from experience which vendors or stakeholders are most helpful and who is ineffective in helping the employee do the job. Again, the information is not normally made explicit, but it can be readily transferred if the employee is asked the right questions. And then there's truly tacit knowledge that's like actually incredibly difficult to articulate and much less easy to transfer to someone else. An example of this kind of knowledge is how to ride a bicycle, right? It's really hard to articulate because it's gained from the comprehension of different elements and situations. It's almost impossible to explain to someone how to balance your weight, steer the wheel, and pedal at the same time in order to learn how to ride a bike. So that's kind of the difference there. And then another form of tacit knowledge is cultural norms. They're really difficult to pass on, and it's actually passed on unconsciously through a set of practices that are pretty unique to each organization. So just keep all of those things in mind. So we already touched on this, but succession plan process also includes gap analysis, right? We want to describe your current state, describe your desired state, and then compare the two to deduce what might be missing. And that's the gap. Then you can assemble an action plan to address the gap. If the skill set, expertise, license, person is suddenly unavailable, we can't function or something really bad can happen. Something that is great in a gap analysis is also a SWOT analysis, which goes over your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. It used to be mostly a business tool, but more and more it is being used by nonprofits and local governments in strategic planning. It helps you evaluate the opportunities and threats posed by the external environment, and the strengths and weaknesses of the internal environment. Right now, by exploring your assets and prioritizing them, we can focus on assets as strengths. So the S of the SWOT. And if you have assets that are important to you, but they're not working, they represent a weakness. So the W of the SWOT, and you might want to carefully plan to repair or replace. Doing a SWOT activity at your organization may help you examine what's helpful and what's problematic for your organization. This is part of your gap analysis, right? You really want to look at the high-risk employees. High-risk employees are more likely to leave the system soon. And if they were to leave, their impact would be significant, right? If someone retires or if someone's poached, how is that going to impact your system? If it's significant, they're high risk. Medium risk employees are two categories. So employees that are likely to leave the water system soon, but if they were to leave, the impact would be pretty minor. Or people who are unlikely to leave soon, but if they were to leave, the impact would be pretty significant. And those top medium risks do eventually move into high risk after they've gained a little bit more time in the industry and maybe are planning on leaving anytime soon. Obviously, low risk, we don't really need to think about when looking at SWOT, position knowledge surveys, or gap analysis. So now I'm going to go over what a position knowledge survey is. It's basically just a structured, systematic tool that can be used within your organization to assess and document knowledge, skills, competencies, and responsibilities required for a specific job or position. The primary goal of a position knowledge survey is to comprehensively capture the essential information and requirements associated with a particular role within the organization. So we are going to document job requirements, assess competencies, clarify expectations, talk about what kinds of training and development will come from this and what they've already done and completed. Succession planning. A position knowledge survey is very critical in succession planning, and it helps to identify potential successors. Performance evaluation. It can be a basis for employee performance evaluations, and helps provide kind of a clear standard against which employees can be assessed. Recruitment and hiring. So we need to look at what someone does, right? If we have already done the position knowledge survey with everyone in the department, then we know exactly what we're hiring for. We know exactly what they're going to be doing, and we can use that for our messaging and also when we're actually looking at people's skills to hire. Helps us mitigate risk, obviously, as we're planning for succession, and that's always mitigating risk. And then maintaining position knowledge surveys can also help organizations demonstrate that they're in compliance with various labor and employment laws. So the first step is the bigger picture, right? So when you kick off the survey, you want to take a step back and consider a broader perspective. The first focus is on the organizational goals. This is understanding your organization's mission, vision, and overall goals. It's important to recognize how your role contributes to the mission and goals of your organization. The alignment is kind of what keeps your community receiving essential services long after you transition out of your position. As the first step, you want to attach a copy of your community, organization, or department's mission, vision, and goals. And then that kind of will provide a little framework and direction for the work that we do. And then you can highlight your contributions that you've made during your tenure. So you want to highlight sections which you've directly contributed to, unique contributions that are vital to help maintain the relevance and effectiveness of the organization's goals. And remember, understanding the broader mission not only provides context for your work, but it also helps in the transfer of knowledge and responsibilities. And the next step is all about identifying the tasks and activities that only you know how to address within your current position, your unique expertise. So you want to think of this as an opportunity to highlight unique expertise and contributions to your organizations. Again, aspects of your work only known to you, and this is where we document them. So you want to ask yourself, what are you the go-to person for in your current role? What tasks and responsibilities are known only to you and require your specific knowledge and skills? What does your office or department rely on you for? And in what areas are you the subject matter expert? You want to document that list, right? Your responsibilities to these questions will form the basis of your list of critical responsibilities and activities. The list is not only a valuable resource for your current team, but also essential for, again, knowledge transfer and succession planning. And this is also part of step 2. So again, you want to think of, I think this one's super helpful. You want to think of when you return from vacation or being away from work, what work is just waiting for you to do because you know no one else knows how to do it. And when you're not working, can you think of anything you worry won't be done well while you're gone? And then if so, what? Document it. Make sure people know where that gap is, what that gap is. So now we've gone over the position knowledge survey. We'll just talk about some methods for transferring knowledge, right? So we want to be able to plan for succession, and that means we have to figure out a way to give the new employee all of our knowledge. So first of all, it's best to have overlapping positions, right? Hiring a new person before the old one leaves and hopefully have them fully trained. Documenting processes and records. If you do something technical, this is very specific, but if you do something technical that involves coding, keeping a document of all of the technical things that you do is great to do in GitHub. But otherwise, it's great to have a well-organized area of documents that's easy to find and separated into folders. We're currently moving all of our files from an X drive onto our team site. So we totally know that documenting processes and records is really hard to organize, but it's definitely worth it. You can rehire retirees for part of the time, for part-time, right? We do this all the time. A lot of people will retire and then be kind of gnawing at the bit to get back into things. So you can reach out and see if it's something that they're interested in, to be kind of a consultant and assist part-time. It's really nice to get their knowledge and have them back on board working with the team. Making videos of people doing work, right? Something that when I began this job is recreating trainings that we had. So really learn the process that you're trying to document. Put together a list of things that people need to know to achieve that specific task. Ask people who went through old trainings if there was a gap in knowledge, what you really struggled with the training, and you can kind of plot these various topics on a timeline and then create a series of PowerPoints. And once you do that, you can add in, this is very specific, but screen recordings, right? If you're doing anything on your computer, it's so nice to be able to see what you're doing in the future. And screen recordings is the best way to do that. I know PowerPoint has a lot of new capabilities for you to screen record and add that into your presentation. SOPs, standardized record keeping formats, archiving and data retrieval systems, you can use those. And then you want to cross-train existing staff. You don't want your work to be siloed, right? Everyone can have an expertise, but objectively, someone else in your organization should know how to do this person's task. It shouldn't just be you who knows how to do the task. And then lastly, job shadowing and mentoring programs. I mean, I mentioned this earlier, but mentoring is super helpful, right? It teaches younger professionals how to perform certain job tasks, and as much time as it takes, it's definitely always really great for retainment and training. Types of documents you can save: manuals, maps, photos, videos, notebooks, GIS data, system diagrams, as-built drawings, and policy guides. So why is this documentation so crucial, right? It definitely is really crucial. It plays a pivotal part in knowledge transfer. It helps staff understand how things work, where things are located, why certain processes are in place, and what their responsibilities and tasks are. Keeping documentation updated is so important. It's not enough to just have that documentation, right? We have to keep it updated. Otherwise, it's kind of useless, right? We want to ensure that the information is remaining accurate and relevant. And if we are updating documentation constantly, then we're reducing the need for a major knowledge transfer process in the future. And then lastly, we want to avoid dependency on individuals. We should not rely on the risky method of having everyone reach out to the same person or small group within our team for information. While experienced individuals are definitely valuable resources, their expertise should be supplemented with accessible and up-to-date documentation. Dependence on these individuals will really create bottlenecks and vulnerabilities in our workflow. So if we can just document, be very transparent, and make sure that everyone is kind of on the same page, then we're in a lot better place. Training and development. So this is so important. The foundation of a skilled workforce definitely begins with a big commitment to invest in training. It's obviously an ongoing process, and it's super time consuming and sometimes frustrating, but it definitely ensures that your team remains adaptable and capable. One size doesn't fit all. You want to customize your training programs, and that's pretty essential to meet the needs of your utility. If you tailor training to unique challenges and opportunities, then you'll definitely maximize the effectiveness. Additionally, with that, right, we have to identify the knowledge and skills required for future roles within our organization. I know it's hard to fit this into your day-to-day workflow, but it's something to just have in the back of your mind, thinking of what you really need to keep evolving with the industry demands. Technical and soft skills, we want to encompass both the technical, which are specific competencies needed to perform tasks, and then the soft skills, which are interpersonal communication abilities that will definitely enhance teamwork, leadership, and problem solving. Obviously, soft skills typically are a little bit harder to train, but definitely not impossible. So we have online training opportunities, which offer flexibility and accessibility. That's why most of the training that I've created is online, especially for our younger coworkers. Workshops provide more hands-on learning experiences and opportunities for collaborative skill building, and they're effective for both technical and soft skills. Mentoring, again, I know I've talked about mentoring a lot, but it's really great. It's one-on-one guidance. It offers personalized learning and definitely a wealth of practical knowledge. Computer simulations can definitely provide risk-free environment for hands-on practice, particularly useful for technical training and problem-solving exercises. We definitely make all of our students go through online training and then run through the motions themselves, which I guess could be technically considered as a computer simulation. Classroom training, we'll have less of this nowadays. I think workshops and mentoring are kind of in replacement of the classroom, but it's definitely still valuable, especially for more in-depth technical education and group learning experiences. Interagency training, right? We do a lot of trainings with other agencies or organizations because they'll offer, a broader perspective and different experiences than our team has. Definitely encourages knowledge exchange and, kind of a cross-pollination of ideas. And then in-house training, customized in-house training programs are definitely tailored, again, to unique utility needs. So that helps team members receive some industry-specific knowledge and skills. Effective workforce development is a cornerstone, right? We want maintenance schedules, which are kind of the backbone of operations, regularly maintaining and updating these schedules. Day-to-day operations are obviously foundations of our work as well. Routine should be well documented, which allow for seamless handovers between team members, promoting some consistency and overlap within our organizations. Regulated work. So for any task subject to regulations, it's definitely crucial to have very specific processes in place that ensure compliance. This can include clear guidelines, quality control measures, QA/QC, super important, and documentation to demonstrate adherence to those regulatory standards. Embracing technology, right, is a vital part of our modern workforce development. It involves ongoing training on new tools, systems, and softwares, which helps us with efficiency and definitely keeps us up with some industry advancements. Training and mentoring. I mean, you guys are going to get so tired of hearing me say mentoring, but fostering professional growth is really great. Cross-training existing staff and creating opportunities for job shadowing. And then lastly, job sharing is a very flexible arrangement that allows employees to divide responsibility of a full-time position and can be particularly beneficial for maintaining continuity and achieving some work-life balance if that's what certain people need. Things to check before someone leaves. This is kind of a little bit in the weeds, but it's really important. Usernames and passwords. So first and foremost, right, account access. You want to make sure that you have a list of usernames and passwords. You want to safeguard that sensitive information and pass it on to authorized personnel. Do you use a password manager? And if so, you want to ensure access is transferred securely or document the master password. We at the EFC, at the UNC-EFC, use LastPass, and it's great. Definitely helps for when I forget my passwords, which is all the time. Assets assigned to you. So don't forget about your company assets whenever people are leaving. You can document equipment, devices, and tools that are given to them and try to get return or reassignment. Just kind of have a plan for those assets. Manuals, right? So we want to make sure that those manuals are updated and make sure that they're documented. So any processes that someone's mastered should definitely be documented for the next person in the role. Contacts with vendors and third parties. So we can create a record of vendor and third-party contacts, right? So we can share the crucial network with the successor. And if someone's leaving, you want to make sure that they personally, this is a preference, but I think it's important to make sure that they personally connect you with contacts that are relevant per person, right? It definitely just makes the transition a lot more smooth. Um, and it's important to set up email forwarding and automatic replies to make sure that your customers have a contact to reach at your utility. And then there's definitely a lot more unique considerations for your specific role. So you have to think of any additional tasks, responsibilities, or resources that should be handed over. And then finally, I just wanted to mention that I think it's hugely important, and it's a hugely important opportunity that a lot of towns are missing out on, which is regional collaboration. So of course, counties are always a great resource. A lot of dedicated planners, public servants working in those organizations, and they can help you pull together resource needs. Bigger challenges sometimes get more attention, right? So if it turns out in your succession planning work, you're looking at maybe 1 or 2 positions or even 5 or 10, it might not seem worth it for some full-blown campaign. But if you were to ask your neighboring communities in the watershed or in your stormwater collaborative to do the same, you might find 50 or 100 jobs and other needs, right? That's a great opportunity to say, hey, we have a problem that's at a big enough scale to warrant regional action, news, maybe a state grant, maybe even our own workforce development program that's specific to our region and built upon our values. And obviously, it's not always easy to work with neighboring towns or cities. Identities change quite a bit, whether you're in one region or another. I think the bigger difference is that there's a lot of communities that people don't really interact with much, so they tend to see themselves as different. But it's definitely worth it if you can find common ground. Now we're going to talk about communicating with the utility and its board. And then lastly, we'll talk about communication between a utility and their stakeholders. Another poll for you guys. Let's see. So the question is, have you ever experienced challenges presenting information about your water or wastewater utility to your community? Again, I'll give you guys about a minute. I know a lot of this is not applicable because a lot of people on the call are not working at a utility. All right, about 15 more seconds for this poll. Looks like most people have already voted. Okay, awesome. So it looks like most people don't work at a utility, but when people are having challenges, it looks like everyone's having issues when presenting at town meetings or city council. So let's get on to communication. All right. So obviously, I'm assuming that you're all familiar with these, but because you work in these roles, but there's some of you who may be early in your career, new to the public sector, or came from somewhere else. So maybe you're familiar with these, but haven't really thought of them as a key audience. Sometimes they're thought of as a nuisance or an obstacle to doing your work. So I'm hoping we can discuss some ways to understand how they can help you in implementing some of the workforce development needs that you'll have identified if you were to focus on the stuff we've talked about today. Board of directors, commissions, and counselors are vital components of our governance landscape. Their duties, including providing oversight, setting direction and policies, upholding fiduciary duty, and ensuring compliance with the law, are pretty critical to the health and success of the organizations they serve. They act as the guardians of our shared vision and values. Board members and city council have a critical role in setting the direction of our utility. Typically, they help develop long-term goals that protect health and financial sustainability, help set policies for effective and legal system operation, establish customer service goals, oversee finances, actively practice transparency, hopefully, communicate effectively to our customers, and are active and collaborative team members. Staff is the backbone of the utility and are responsible for its day-to-day operations. They run the system by executing day-to-day tasks, implement and enforce policies set by the board, maintain financial records for transparency and accountability, operate, maintain, repair, manage, and replace assets, implement water loss control programs, promote energy efficiency, provide some customer service, and then keep the board well informed about operational matters. Operators are valuable members of our utility, ensuring the smooth functioning of the system. They maintain the system through repairs, maintenance, testing, and troubleshooting, possess a very deep understanding of the entire treatment process, and comply with regulations and maintain proper certifications. And then customers, the ratepayers play a vital role in the success of our utility. They should act as, wise consumers, helping conserve water and resources by fixing leaks and using water efficient fixtures. They need to recognize the utility significance and support it as a vital part of the community. The board and staff must facilitate learning opportunities for ratepayers, right? And it's important for ratepayers to voice their service level preferences and willingness to invest, allowing the board to make rate adjustments that ensure the utility's sustainability. So helping us understand kind of the unique roles and responsibility of the stakeholders is pretty paramount to some effective communication and collaboration and overall success of the utility. Effective communication with the board is essential for the smooth functioning and decision-making within your utilities. You should aim to know the board and the audience, right? It's vital to understand your board members, their backgrounds, their priorities. You want to tailor your communication to address their specific interests and concerns, and recognize that one size does not fit all. Each board member may have a unique perspective and expectation, and consider the personalities within the board, right? Some members may respond better to logical, data-driven arguments, while others may be more influenced by emotional or values-based appeals. So you want to be a little bit flexible in your approach to accommodate those different preferences. Build relationships and be comfortable with your board members, right? So when you're at a formal meeting and preparing to share with the board, don't just wait for the meeting to start to interact with people in the room, and make sure that you practice what you're going to say before you get there. Don't limit your interaction with board members to formal meetings either, right? You can foster relationships by inviting them to visit your facility, sharing interesting news or updates, and informing them about events that you're attending. These kind of personal touches help build rapport and create a more comfortable atmosphere. You want to know their triggers, identify those sensitive topics that may affect board members. Understanding those triggers kind of allows you to navigate discussions more effectively, and avoid unnecessary conflicts. Potential triggers and sensitive topics may be, crisis situations. We all know that these happen, but it makes for a lot more pressure on the board when you go there and things are on fire. So you want to try to get there before the fire starts. Others can be legal concerns, conflicts of interest, but again, each member of the board will have their own trigger, so it's best to plan ahead and do as much research as you can on the people that you're presenting to. Never lie or guess. I think this is pretty self-explanatory again, but you want to maintain your credibility. If you don't have an answer, it's better to say, I don't know, or I'll look into it, and commit to finding that information. And then lastly, you want to keep cool, right? You want to maintain your professionalism and composure, even in those challenging, sticky situations. Effective communication is more likely to occur when you remain calm and collected. And if you find that a discussion is becoming unproductive or tense, you don't need to be afraid to suggest discussing the matter in a future meeting. It allows you to kind of step back, gain perspective, and approach the issue more constructively. Effective communication with the board is not just about what you say, but also when you say it. So monthly communication is crucial for staying up to date with pressing issues and financial matters, particularly income and water or wastewater sales. These updates help maintain a current picture of the utility's performance and challenges. Quarterly communication, the focus shifts to capital purchases and plans. The timing allows for a thorough discussion of investments in assets and infrastructure, and ensures that the board has an opportunity to review and approve these expenditures. And then annually, there are going to be 2 key communication points. The Consumer Confidence Report, which is essential for demonstrating the quality of water supply. And secondly, the annual report, which provides comprehensive overview of the utility's performance throughout the year. Keep in mind, most of the communication will happen during the regular meetings. The practice ensures compliance with open meetings and provides a structured platform for discussions. You can make sure to place a meeting agenda and include the topics that you're going to talk about well in advance. Prepare informative materials to support that communication. Be very transparent about costs associated with proposed actions or initiatives. And prior to the meeting, it's nice to provide a written summary that includes the 5 W's and H. It allows board members to come prepared for discussions. Again, it's not just that, right? It's about providing sufficient detail without overwhelming them. You want to avoid micromanagement because boards are concerned with the bigger picture and strategic decisions. So leave your day-to-day operational details to your staff. You want to avoid too many details, right? Offering too many options can lead to decision paralysis. So you want to focus on presenting a manageable number of well-considered choices. Highlighting some substantive items that matter most to the board's oversight role is always a good one. And include areas like life expectancy, how long can they expect assets to remain in service, what are warranty terms and what does it cover, anticipated maintenance expenses over time, how will energy consumption impact the utility sustainability, staff requirements that are associated with any labor needs, and how the community will be involved or informed about these important decisions. Effective communication with the board is about more than just when and how you communicate, but also how you make your message impactful and relatable. You can use visual elements like pictures or videos. They're pretty invaluable in your communication toolbox. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words, and in this case, it's worth 1,000 connections. So incorporating visuals into your presentations can help convey some more complex ideas and emotions a lot more effectively. Showing the impact on your community. It's not enough to just present your organization's needs. You want to show how these needs directly impact the community. As we've discussed, tying your infrastructure or workforce needs to the community's core values, like a beautiful and clean ocean in a coastal community, that can resonate deeply with your audience. So demonstrating the impact on what the community values will make the message much more compelling. We talked about storytelling earlier as well, but building on what we talked about, remember that a story is just an invitation to care about something. It's a way to make your message relatable. You can use real life examples and experiences to show how your needs affect people's daily lives in the community. Building consensus about action. Effective communication, again, is not just about conveying ideas, it's about driving action. Our goal is to build consensus around actionable solutions. By using visuals and storytelling, we can help our audience care about the problem and channel the care into meaningful actions. We want the board to think, I care about this because it affects my community and I want to be a part of the solution. Once you've effectively communicated your message, the next crucial step is deciding how to proceed. Boards need reasonable options. They appreciate having choices that are reasonable and practical. Options that present should address the challenges or opportunities that you've communicated and offer a path forward. You want to avoid presenting extreme solutions, again, or an overwhelming array of choices. Focus on options that align with the organization's goals. In some cases, outsourcing a solution can be a viable option. This approach can be cost-effective and efficient, especially when it involves specialized tasks or services. When proposing outsourcing, you want to be sure to provide the board with information about benefits, potential risks, and expected outcomes. And sometimes the best course of action is to allow for more time to conduct thorough research. Rushing decisions can lead to unintended consequences. And if you believe that additional research is needed to make those informed choices, you don't need to hesitate to recommend delaying the decision until you have more comprehensive information. And then this last piece here on informing the board of substantial issues, transparency is pretty key. If you're facing some substantial issues, it's important to keep the board informed, even if you do have incomplete information. You want to clearly articulate the challenges and uncertainties, providing, again, transparent assessment of the situation. Some do's and don'ts of presenting options is you want to be honest, always present those opinions truthfully, provide a comprehensive view of the life cycle costs associated with each option. Transparency is key. Fairly assess and compare each option. Consider the pros and cons of each. Include the do nothing option, right, along with the consequences of inaction. It's very impactful when explaining why you should do something. If relevant, you can offer financing options to help the board understand the financial implications. Again, incorporating visual aids like graphics and photos to enhance some understanding and engagement. And we want to express your professional opinion when necessary, providing some guidance while respecting the board's ultimate decision-making authority. We don't want you to jump to conclusions or assume that the board will not have good input. You want to respect the board's expertise. Risk compliance. Ensure that presented options are in compliance with regulations and policy. Unfairly burdensome options, right? Present options without bias. Avoid unfairly burdening certain choices with excessive risks or challenges. And believe council and board members cannot take bad news. You don't want to do that, right? give your board members some credit for their ability to handle that difficult information. Honesty, even in challenging situations, is definitely appreciated. So with that, we're moving on to our last topic for today, which is communication with stakeholders. Partnerships are incredibly important for the success of a system, and learning how to communicate with those stakeholders is pretty essential to forming a group of people who are on board with changes that your utility decides to make. Something to keep in mind is that a lot of communication with the board can apply to communication with the stakeholders as well. So we won't stay in this section for very long. The basics of communication with stakeholders is the basics of communicating with the board. So first, we're going to start with a poll again. All right, it's launched. So we want to see how has your utility typically engaged with stakeholders in terms of partnerships and communication. And if you've already voted that you're not a part of a utility, that is okay. You can put whatever you feel for your specific organization. And I don't know if you guys can see it, but there is a fourth option. You just have to scroll down on the poll. It's been about a minute, but I'll give you guys a little bit more time. It looks like the voting percentage is almost as high as it has been. All right, I'm going to go ahead and share these results. So it looks like typically when you're engaging with stakeholders in terms of communication, it's either very frequently or occasionally. I don't see anyone who put inconsistently, and only one person said rarely, which is great. So wait, sorry guys, stop sharing and close. Okay, great. So who are stakeholders? You already probably know this, but I'm going to spell it out. So stakeholders are those who may be impacted by the implementation of a change associated with the utility. Stakeholders include customers, water system owners and staff, local or state health departments, community centers, and schools or child care facilities. Allies, organizations, or individuals with an interest in the success of a utility. They're often willing to voice their support for your utility and include community organizing groups, technical assistance providers, senior centers or community centers, local chamber of commerce, schools, and child care facilities. And then lastly, a champion is going to be a trusted community member who believes in the utility and any changes made by that utility. Someone who's really willing to promote and communicate the value of the changes. Examples of champions are going to be like a citizens committee, a TA provider, the owner of a system, or a county or regional government. Not all stakeholders will be project allies or proponents of the utility. Facilitating discussions between all stakeholders early on when making changes helps understand all perspectives, builds trust, and assures transparency. Champions and allies can be used to present these messages that show the value of partnerships and changes to stakeholder groups who may not initially see the benefits. Recognizing the importance of stakeholders, right? So stakeholders play a pivotal role in maintaining the functionality of your utility. They're not just the ones who pay the bills, they're pretty much the lifeblood of the operation, right? You want to develop a communication plan So a well thought out communication plan is pretty crucial, right? Before reaching out to other organizations, it's imperative to have some internal discussions to define system goals, identify any challenges, and explore how partnerships can be beneficial. Engaging with partners and supporters. So after evaluating options and establishing supports, the next step is going to be crafting a communication plan. So then here we go, right? So right into this. Number one, identifying the right messenger. Um, you can you need to find an effective spokesperson or team, and the chosen messenger should have a deep understanding of the operations and communicate in a way that resonates with the audience. Um, Keeping stakeholders informed. We want consistent updates and clear communications about changes and improvements, whether it's enhancing wastewater treatment or fostering partnerships. That transparent communication is essential. You want to address your community concerns. Addressing the natural concerns of stakeholders is a pretty proactive choice. Open dialogue allows to listen to their worries, provide some reassurance, and collaborate on solutions to build their trust and understanding. And then highlighting community benefits. So emphasizing the positive impact of the wastewater or water utility on the community. It's pretty essential. Safeguarding public health and the environment to supporting economic growth. It helps us showcase tangible benefits and reinforces the value we bring to the community. I just wanted to go back kind of a few slides. I'm not going to actually physically go back, but it was in our last with the board. You want to make sure that you can identify your stakeholders. They're going to have different needs and different desires than your board members. You want to engage with the community members and invite them to tour the facility and kind of make sure to foster familiarity and trust. Recognize those triggers with stakeholders. A lot of times it is rate increases, so make sure you come well and prepared for those conversations. You want to continue to remain truthful and then again, stay composed. So in summary, there are challenges to finding and hiring qualified staff for the water and wastewater industry, to presenting to boards, and to presenting to your stakeholders, and make sure that you're budgeting in everything you need and can afford to address all major challenges that are being faced on a day-to-day basis. So as one kind of final piece, right, our EFC network is nationwide. We're always working with states on free trainings like this one, but we're also doing direct technical assistance, helping communities go after bipartisan infrastructure law funding in particular disadvantaged communities. So it's always good to hear more directly from you on what you need. We have the ability to for you guys to request technical assistance. You can go to the link and fill out the form. If it's anything more in depth, we can help out with that. And with that, do you guys have any questions? We have about 5 minutes. So if you guys have any questions, we can answer those now. So here's our contact information. You guys can still message. I'll stay on until 12. This is our contact information. And after you leave this, you'll be directed to fill out a form, and it'll evaluate our Kentucky training day 1 and day 2. Again, we really appreciate you all for being here, and you guys can have your 5 minutes back if you don't have any questions.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Mike or Michael, do you have any questions that I can help you guys with? Perfect.